My day-to-day life is a slower pace and in a place that really speaks to my heart and soul. And so it feels really good to have allowed myself this. I love who I am now, and I don't have that feeling that I had before. It was something that I wanted that I didn't even understand. I don't have that anymore. I just want to remind people to give themselves permission to live differently.
Welcome to Shaping Freedom. These conversations are about how freedom is actually formed, what we inherit, what stops working, and the choices that change how we live and lead. I'm your host, Lisane Basquiat. This year, I'm having conversations about how freedom is actually formed, not in theory, but in practice. We inherit patterns long before we have language for them, ways of feeling safe, ways of moving through the world, ways of deciding what's possible for us. At some point, many of us realize that what we inherited no longer fits, and that's where choice begins. Not dramatic choice, practical choice, often quiet, very often uncomfortable. Today's conversation is about legacy and well-being and what happens when someone chooses to live in a way that regulates the nervous system, honors the spirit, and then makes room for others to do the same. I'm joined today by Simone Adams, the founder and executive director of Color My Outdoors. It's a grassroots nonprofit rewriting the nature narrative for people of color in the South. Simone's relationship with the outdoors didn't begin as a trend or as a wellness strategy. It began as legacy. She grew up camping and hiking with her father, often in spaces where they were the only ones who looked like them. Her earliest memories of nature are not about fear, but about safety, about knowing that she was okay because her father had her. That imprint carried forward. Years later, when the pace and pressure of conventional life no longer made sense, Simone stripped her life down to what she actually needed and chose a different rhythm, one rooted in nature, solitude, and spiritual alignment. What began as personal regulation has since become public leadership. Through Color My Outdoors, Simone is creating access, visibility, and permission for others to reconnect with nature as a space of belonging, authenticity, and well-being. Simone, I'm so happy that you're here. Happy New Year and welcome to the podcast.
Happy New Year, Lisane, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm so excited about this conversation that we're getting ready to have. I have to say that when I heard about you and what you're up to, I had a moment of like, what? And then, and then I looked, I looked you up and I read more about who you are and what you've done, and how you're choosing to live your life. And I saw where there is absolute, alignment and connection. And I'm so excited to hear you share your story with the audience.
Thank you. So excited. The topic that you're talking on. And yeah, it sounded like beautiful alignment. So I'm excited to share and to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started into the meaty stuff, how's your year going so far?
It's good. Happy New Year, like you said. Good. I had an interesting New Year's Eve where I wanted to go on a short hike and dropped my keys on the trail. So ended up going on a very long hike to go find those keys. But it was also it was really beautiful. A couple of things happened. Ended up hiking at night, which I didn't expect, but it was beautiful. Got in my long hike for 2025 to bring in my new year. And even though it was like one of those moments that you don't want to happen, everything turned out okay. And so it was a wonderful way to just set the frame for this year. Everything will be okay.
Everything's going to be okay. I truly believe that. Yeah, I really believe that. In reading your story, the moments that you shared with your dad really resonated with me. I was raised primarily by my father in his home. And I have stepped into this life having felt a similar feeling of safety. And so I thought, for selfish reasons, because I'm really interested in talking about this, and also because I believe that it is a topic that can be and will be very helpful to those who listen, I'd love to, if you don't mind, for us to start with that moment that you mentioned where your dad put you on his shoulders. And I'd love to know what that taught you about, what that taught you internally about the world.
Thank you for letting me start there. It's one of my earliest memories. And I did grow up in a two-parent household, but my mother is not a fan of the outdoors. And so this was the bonding thing that I've always had with my dad. And one of my earliest memories, I was probably 4 years old, very young. Um, had a couple of my male cousins had come down. My family's from New York, but they moved here when I was an infant, so I was raised here. Had the city cousins come down from New York, and we're all in the woods going for a hike. These cousins are all older than me, and they decided to scare me and make me think that a bear was chasing me.
Oh,
But
kids are
it's
terrible
guys,
sometimes. I mean, really.
it's guys. Um, but in doing so, like everybody's running and screaming, and my dad picks me up to run with me. And so even though they were trying to scare me, I remember thinking, oh, well, my dad's got me, so nothing's going to happen. Like everything's okay. And the woods have always felt like a safe space to me. I love being out there. It's never been the scary thing that I think it is for many people.
Yeah. You talked about, and I want to get into how you got to this particular place. Um, but I also would love to know, no, why don't we just do it? Tell us about the moment that you decided to actually create this organization, to create this movement. Let's talk about that. What was happening in your life and where were you? Like, who are you? Let's talk about
Oh, the
who
who
are
am
you, Simone?
there's a little something to the who am I that probably leads into that. I'm a Gemini, so I can do things on a whim, and I have no problem changing on a dime. So I was a nonprofit consultant. I had left the comfort, grew up in Atlanta, left the comfort of Atlanta to explore, see other spaces, uh, traveled, did some road tripping out west in the Pacific Northwest, and then came back to the Southeast in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. So this is kind of outside of Asheville, North Carolina, and I lived in the mountains in a very rural space, very different from the 5 million people of Metro Atlanta. I lived in a town of like 1,600 people. Um, and I was in this beautiful space, reconnecting with nature, spending more time outdoors. I had just learned to kayak. It was 2021. So I had pretty much stayed in the whole year of COVID, um, stayed in, but went outside, like stayed away from people, but went outside into nature, and was working remotely as a nonprofit consultant. And in 21, when everybody, especially the nonprofit world, was all into equity, I had a couple of clients who I felt were doing the work inauthentically. And I refused to be a part of that inauthentic work and got really frustrated. And I was on my first solo kayaking trip and decided it's time for me to start my own nonprofit. I've helped all these other nonprofits build themselves up. I want to start my own. I want to do something that feels really meaningful. So what do I do? And I was outside and I was like, of course, I want to be outside. I want more people to feel, to have this opportunity to just connect and reconnect with nature. And so I decided to start Color My Outdoors, but to do it a little bit differently. I wanted to not replicate all the work that's already being done. There's so many people who are doing the great work of leading people into the outdoors. And what I realized was I wanted to use the skills I had as a nonprofit consultant and um, be a liaison, be a boon for these people who are doing the work of leading people outdoors, and be a liaison for them to the outdoor industry as a whole. So the work that I do with Color My Outdoors is really to uplift the outdoor leaders of color, who they are leading hiking groups and they are introducing kids to the outdoors and introducing adults to the outdoors, and women's hiking groups and men's hiking groups, and offering them opportunities to get the certifications they need, offering a network for them to uh, both promote their platforms, but also to get to know each other, and offering business development opportunities for them, and being sort of a, like gathering this collective voice so that the industry begins to hear us and take us seriously. And then also the rewriting the narrative part is to make this our norm, so that instead of feeling like I'm the only person who looks like me outside, I know that when I go outside, I'm always seeing people who look like me. And but that we see it in media too, that we see it, you know, that we become the main characters of this story.
And where were you before this? What was your life like before you made this
Ooh.
decision as a nonprofit consultant? Like, what took you from, okay, I'm going to do that thing, to I'm going to move, first of all, and go
Yeah.
move from bustling Atlanta to a much smaller town? How, if you don't mind sharing some of that? And I'm
Uh,
really wanting to get to like that moment where you had came to a crossroad and there was some awareness in there. That's what I'd love to hear a little
yeah.
bit more about.
There were a couple of things that brought me to that crossroads. I'm a mother. My son is 27 years old. When I had gotten married when he was about 10, but it wasn't a healthy marriage, and I left that marriage when he was about 15. And so I left an unhealthy marriage that was a bit oppressive. I was in a job that was way too demanding. I was working 60 hours a week. My son was in high school. I remember like having to tell him to Grubhub was the food delivery service at the time. And I don't know how many dinners I would have to tell him, just call Grubhub and order whatever you want because I'm not going to be there. I'm working late. Um, and it was, there was one day that I had told my son I was going to take him out to dinner. And I didn't realize how many times I had disappointed him by working late, and like, oh, I was good at the hustle and bustle life, that hustle and grind culture that Atlanta and so many cities will ask of you. I was good at it. And I told him that I was going to take him out to dinner. I'm rushing. And so I get to the house and I tell him, I was like, just come outside because I'm running late. I was like, just come outside and I'll just, so we'll go straight there. And he gets in the car and I was like, okay, where do you want to go eat? And he was like, oh, I already ate. And like my heart dropped because I was like, oh, but I told you I was taking you out to eat. And he was like, yeah, well, I just expected that you weren't going to be able to make it. Like that moment, that's really the moment that I knew I had to make a change. It was, so I had already, left behind this marriage that didn't work. And now I needed to leave the job that didn't work. And in leaving the job that didn't work, I realized it wasn't the job because I'd been a workaholic at the job before that. It was really my mindset. So when I left that job, I decided I need to work for myself. I need to set my own pace because when I work for other people, I just do something stupid. um, And it's part of Black women culture, right? We're always striving to prove ourselves and overcome the obstacles. And so we do a lot. And I made the decision then to work for myself. I decided I wanted to go back and get my master's. I got my master's of fine arts and writing from the Savannah College of Art and Design, something I'd always wanted to do. It wasn't a career move, it was a personal move. It was something that was personal to me. Um, and then I decided my son he was going off to college, and I decided I want to, I've tried to do the most. What happens if I try to do the least? And so I gave myself this really interesting challenge. How little can I make instead of how much can I make? How little can I make? And um and so I figured it out. And my son was living in a dorm at the time, so I didn't have to worry about how to provide for him. And I ended up I was working 2 days a week. I worked 20 hours a week. I just did 2 10-hour days. Um, and it was beautiful. And I had all this time. Before that, my son had gone off to school, I had really pulled back though so that I could be a part of his life. Um, and so I was doing that. I was working 20 hours a week before he went off to college. And so that I was able to be the team mom for the cross country team and, just be a really active part of his life, which I hadn't done since he was little. And it was a really beautiful time for us to spend like the last 2 years of his high school career where I was there for him. And then once he went off, I was like, okay, let me pull back even further and um, started doing this minimalist thing. And then I just remember people always asking in Atlanta, you tell somebody, oh, I only work 2 days a week. And they're like, what do you do with the rest of your time? Um, it wasn't this joyous thing and we weren't yet doing the whole soft life and rest is revolution type thing. So it wasn't appreciated that I had figured out like I can slow down. And I wanted to leave Atlanta to find people who just wanted to live a different life, live a different pace of life, not deal with Atlanta traffic. So I left Atlanta. I moved to New Mexico for a year. I lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico. It's very south, close to the border. Uh, Definitely a different pace of life there. People there left work at work, and I had never seen like a whole city do this. It was the mindset of the city. Like work is work, and then your family, friends, whatever you do outside of work, that is something else. And it's like, oh, this is beautiful here. And then I did a road trip. I decided, okay, I've lived in New Mexico for a year. I've slowed down. I've learned how to do this slow life. Um, and then I did a road trip, which this was also minimalist, but um, changed me forevermore. And I did a 3-month road trip, camping in an SUV with a dog and a cat um, through the Pacific Northwest. And I spent 3 months on the road. Occasionally, I would grab an Airbnb, but mostly I was camping and cooking and living in nature and just in forest or along the Pacific coast and experiencing a part of the country I'd never been to, a way of life I hadn't yet experienced, but also a lifetime dream of mine. Like I had always wanted to travel in that sort of way that wasn't scripted. Every day I woke up and was like, oh, where do I want to drive to today? So I didn't have the itinerary mapped out. I didn't have an end date to the trip. It was just go and be. I was still working remotely. So, okay, I did need to get to internet occasionally to get, work for a client, but it was the most magical time of my life. And definitely those series of things changed me, hopefully forevermore.
All right, can we talk a moment about setting the vibe? If you're anything like me, your space needs to feel good in order for you to feel good. And that's why I created the Shaping Freedom line of candles. It's not just about ambiance, but really about how you align yourself internally. These are more than just candles, they shift your energy. Whether you're journaling, meditating, working out, or just taking a moment for yourself, these scents are curated to ground you, lift you up, and bring you back home to yourself. They also have an 80-hour burn time and scents that are designed to evoke feelings of alignment and internal congruency. And we can all use that. Go to shop.shapingfreedom.com and check them out. Find the one that speaks to your spirit or buy all four and let them burn with intention. Making the decision to, and I think I read somewhere that you had gotten it down to like, I don't know, $30 a day or something.
Mm-hmm.
Making that decision to strip your life down in that way. What did that teach you about what you actually needed versus maybe what you thought you needed beforehand? Or what did you give up?
I can't, I was living in Atlanta when I decided to do this $30 a day experiment. Two things that happened. One, I did have to give up a lot of the social eat and drink experiences. That's where my money went in Atlanta.
I
Um,
think that's where a lot of people's money goes.
I
I think a lot of folks, when they sit down and work it through, like that's where the dollars are.
where it
That's where the
goes.
money is.
It's,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, I love to cook if I'm cooking for myself. I know how to cook and I love to cook, but for the social interactions, it's always, you go out and you do these things. When I got to the $30 a day, this is when I was really trying to see how little I could live on, right? And I ended up doing a housemate situation, which I'm an introvert. I'm a loner. I'm can be the hermit on the top of the mountain, almost literally there. And but I decided to do a housemate situation because I needed my living expenses to be minimal. And so I rented a room in a house. As somebody who typically doesn't even want a roommate, I ended up with two amazing housemates. And so that I think helped with that need to go do social interactions of eating and drinking. And we would all cook collectively sometimes or just buy the bottle of wine. And so the social eating and drinking that would normally uh, kill the wallet, it was a perfect time in my life to sort of peel away those expenses and create a different experience with still being social but doing it in the home and cooking together or just enjoying a bottle of wine together. And so but $30 a day, and I did it in a really interesting way. I would go to the bank and I would get out $900 in cash, and I would ask the teller to give it to me all in tens. And then they would usually give me a room to count it because I have to now count $900 worth of $10 bills. And then I would clip it into $30, $30 increments. And so basically it was 30 days of $30. And I would, I got really type A with this, even though I'm Gemini. Um, I would put those in envelopes for the week. And what I allowed myself was I can borrow within the week. So if let's say I am going out, okay, I can use tomorrow's $30. I can use 2 days, $30. So I can give myself more money within the day, but I shouldn't spend more than what was allotted for that week. And that helped me to curb my spending. If I use a debit card, I'm just, here you go, here you go, here you go. So to have the cash and really force myself to think about what I'm doing and hand over a bill and realize like, oh, I've used up today's expenses. Now I'm going to borrow from tomorrow. That helped me. I am not disciplined enough to do that mentally with a debit card. So you got to know your weaknesses too.
So you go from being and I can see myself in that at many times in my life where my kids are like, and my kids are adults, older than your son. And there have been many, many times where I pull up and I'm running late because I've been back to back to back. And then, like, they're with me and I'm still kind of finishing up my day and taking calls and all that stuff. Right. Um, and I commend you for having that moment with yourself where you're saying, okay, I want to do something different. I wonder how did your nervous system respond to removing that sense of urgency and all of the activity that was happening at the time? What did that look like?
And this kind of goes to what I said a minute, like knowing your weaknesses. So I realized I kind of needed to I needed to find new habits and new rituals. So rather than the rushing, um, one of the things that I started doing, and this was a really small thing, but it was such a big thing, and I still do it today, is I started making my coffee. I think at the time I was using a French press. Now I do a pour over. But I needed a ritual in the morning. I needed, and I'm a caffeine person. So tea or coffee, as long as it's strong black tea, but I needed a ritual in the morning that reminded me to slow down for the whole day. And so the act of doing a French press coffee, I have to grind the beans, I have to boil the water, I have to pour it in the French press, I have to wait the 5 minutes, I have to slowly press it down. Like that, starting my day out with that one thing that I can't rush, um, helped me to set the pace for the day. And that was a really simple thing. I started working for myself. And so the other thing that I got to do, and I got to do this like my son's entire senior year of high school, it was so beautiful. We had a dog at the time, and she needed to go for a walk in the morning. So I'd do my ritual of making my coffee. My son is getting himself ready for school, and we lived close enough that he could walk to the school. And so I would walk the dog and walk him to school, which was such an amazing point to like, it was something I had been able to do when he was in pre-K, but to do it again his senior year of high school, right? I get to walk my son to school every day. So beautiful that I got to do that under the guise of walking the dog, right? But um, it really, it meant that we spent that time together. It was time for us to talk. And it was just so, it felt organic. It didn't feel forced. And then I would continue walking the dog. So I walked the dog 3 miles a day in the morning. So I started my morning off with that coffee, with walking my son to school, and then continuing on a 3 mile walk to finish walking the dog. And then I would get on the computer and do the work for myself now, um, setting the pace for my day that I got to be leisurely and I didn't have to get on the computer until after I had done all those things, helped with that thing that you asked about, like where my nervous system went. If I didn't have those things, I probably would have still been a wreck, would have been getting on the computer early, feeling like I'm missing out on something, like I'm supposed to be doing something. Because I think that's a lot of, I know I fall victim to that. And I think a lot of us do, but this idea that I'm supposed to be doing something, I shouldn't be idle. And so you end up looking for the thing to do. So that morning ritual became key for not spiraling and not doing to myself what the jobs had done to me.
It seems like this is an incredible story. I'm listening to you tell parts of it, and what I'm envisioning is you not walking away from your life, but walking toward something else
Mm-hmm.
for yourself, walking toward your next chapter and creating a situation for yourself where you are able to be agendaless. Having a couple of things that you're doing, right? But to really not have an agenda. And so many people live on that agenda. Like that is the life. It's the
Yes.
agenda. It's either the agenda or the rejection of the resistance to the agenda, but the agenda is kind of at the forefront. And from what you're describing, it seems that you stepped away from that uh, in a way of reconnecting to yourself or to something,
Yeah.
whatever that is. So what was that about? Again, to go from the pendulum swing from in
Yeah.
Atlanta, where it's like people and there's a lot going on, and there's always something, to going to the Pacific Northwest and to New Mexico
Hmm.
and having these different experiences in these different cultures. Tell us something about that. Like who did you become when you weren't?
Who everybody else needed me to be.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what it was. I was stepping away from, granted it was the person I had been, and it's not that I was a that person wasn't real, but I had built this character based on what other people needed of me, what the job needed of me, what my parents needed of me, what my son needed of me, what my the then husband needed of me. I had inherited people pleasing, and so I was really great at being the person other people needed me to be. Um, and in doing so, I always felt this pull or a lack. I just knew that there was something that I wanted that I couldn't give myself in the parameters of my life as it was. And but because those were the parameters of my life, I also didn't know what it was that I wanted, who it was that I wanted to be. But I knew I needed to get away from expectation. I needed to go away from who I was supposed to be and just find out, who am I when I don't have to please anybody. And waited until my son had, gone off to college so I could do this. I remember too, at one point telling him, like, I think you should go to college out of state. And he didn't. And I was like, okay, well then I'm probably going out of state, just so you know. um, but giving myself some time. And so the year that I spent in Las Cruces, that was my first year away from Atlanta. Um, and I had built a solid, I had a network of friends. I had my family was here. I had built a career for myself in Atlanta. I had a great professional network in Atlanta. Like, it was, and I stepped away to a city in New Mexico that I had never even heard of before I found a client there. And decided that I was just I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna work on this. Just gonna experience something new. And it was so necessary to be separated from everybody and everything that had sort of shaped me to that point, because I needed a blank canvas. And then the road trip that I mentioned, I think that year in New Mexico was just me letting go and making sure I had let go. And then the road trip that I mentioned, that was when I began to discover myself and realize, like, oh, I don't want to live in an urban setting. I want to live in the mountains. I want to live somewhere where I'm surrounded by forest. I want to have a closer connection to nature. I don't want nature to be the the recreational thing that I do on the weekends, but I want it to be a part of my lifestyle. Um, and so I just started to discover these little things about me. And then I moved to the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina and decided I wanted to learn how to forage and rediscover some things that I felt like ancestrally had belonged to me and our people. But I had so long been disconnected from that I didn't even know where to start. I wanted to learn how to grow food. I just wanted to, and so to see who I am now, um, I love who I am now, and I don't have that feeling that I had before, where I was missing something or lacking something, or there was something that I wanted that I didn't even understand. I don't have that anymore. I've found it, and I can still. Um, I'm in Atlanta as we speak today, even though I've got the lovely background of the Blue Ridge Mountains behind me. But I can still come to Atlanta and eat great food and socialize with friends and family. But my day to day life is a slower pace, and in a place that really speaks to my heart and soul. And so it it feels really good to have allowed myself this. But I know I never would have figured it out had I stayed in Atlanta, because I just didn't even know I didn't know what it was. I had to experience it to find it.
How did your community, your friends, your family, um, colleagues, former, or, clients or whatever, how did they respond to this decision that you made?
Um, I remember I remember being scared to tell my mom. And I remember my brother and my dad, like, I asked them to come and be my moral support to tell my mom, because my mom worries for me, um, and I'm an only daughter, so for me to leave her, I knew was going to be hard. Even though we didn't live together, but I had always lived in the same state and relatively close. Um, I remember them wanting to be a fly on the wall when I told her, because they wanted to see her reaction too. But my mom, surprisingly, when I told her, I think she had started to realize, like, this is who Simone is, and I have to let Simone do her thing. And so she was incredibly supportive, never once, like, suggested I not take the step. And I thought that was so interesting. And there were other friends who supportive, but also I think, people tend to project fears. And I remember one of the things that I heard often was, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back. I'm like, well, no, I'm not going to come back. I'm just going to go to the next place. Like, I've already mastered Atlanta. I've done it. I've done it well, but there's so much that I haven't experienced. And I just felt that I was never meant to spend my whole life in one place. And so, um, that but people were still wildly supportive. They just, it was this idea like, well, you can always come back. And I'm like, but I can always also go to the next place. And then as people have seen me fall into what they always knew, like, people knew I went hiking or went camping, and to now see that that is my lifestyle, that is my career, that is my thing. It does feel, I think, like spot on for a lot of the people who knew it was something that I loved to do, but I had to, like, plan a trip to go do it before. And now I get to do it all the time, and it's part of my lifestyle. So I don't think people are terribly surprised. Um, and then there's so many people who are just coming into my life now, and they assume that I've always been this way. Like, if you only knew. I was suits and heels and agenda.
Yeah, I think what's so beautiful about your story is what it brings up for me is how important it is to find your way back to yourself in life. And so much of the way that our culture, our collective culture in this country, Black or otherwise, is structured seems to be with the intention of taking you away from yourself and to almost turn us into robots, right?
Yes.
There's a mainstream way that you are supposed to live, and this is what it looks like. And you get the job, you find the partner, you have the kids, you get the job, you buy the house, you get the dog, you get the cat, you get a fence, right?
Yep.
And you live within, and you have the barbecues on Saturdays and, whatever. And then you live within the realm of that kind of structure. And when you on the upper end, and I'm saying this in air quotes, of that structure, you socialize, and maybe you socialize more and you go to the events and you join the groups and you meet the people and you network and you hand out your card and blah, 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 blah. And there's a structure. There's nothing wrong with that if that is what resonates with your soul, right? But I think that when there is a point of awareness, a moment where you realize that, okay, I did these things, but maybe this isn't me. Maybe this isn't it for me. Maybe being in the room with the networking group and the blue suits and the blah, 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 maybe that isn't for me. Having that awareness and that appreciation for the human that you truly were created to be is such an act of courage, Simone. What an act of courage to decide that you're going to create the life that works best for you, the life that resonates with you, the life that is in best alignment with where you want your own nervous system and your own, life to be. That is such an act of courage. And I commend you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will also say, I felt like I had to. It did take courage because it was scary, but also I wasn't living. I was just surviving in that other version of myself. And I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't happy. Um, you know, and so you do have to find the courage to do the thing, but also the alternative is so sad if you don't. So it was necessary.
That doesn't take away from the courage. That doesn't take away from the courage associated with having made that decision, or with one, becoming aware of it, two, making a decision, and three, living the decision out. That does not take away from that. The fact that you knew that this was something that you had to do. There are so many people who know that there's something that they have to do. You chose to walk through that door.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It is. And it's something that I just want to remind people to give themselves permission to live differently. Because there's it's almost like a prescription for how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to want to live in a certain place. We're supposed to, want certain things for ourselves. But the truth is, we're also very different. So what is it that you want? Even when you mentioned earlier about the things that we do, I have discovered that I'm an introvert. And I didn't know I was an introvert because I grew up around extroverts. I always had such extroverted people in my life. I had extroverted jobs, and you're supposed to want to be around people. And so I did the extroverted things. Social anxiety, was always there. And now I understand, like, oh, I don't actually enjoy doing all of these extroverted things. I can extrovert. I'm not shy. I recharge by spending time by myself. And I'm much more comfortable in small, intimate groups than larger groups. But I didn't know this because that's not how my group of friends and family operated. And so I was always in extroverted situations. And to realize it in my, I don't know, mid to late 30s is when I finally understood I was an introvert. And it just felt ridiculous that I didn't know this before.
Let me tell you, I very recently connected the dots and let me tell you something, give me a mic, I love it. put me in front of a group of people, I love it. I'm fine with that. Um, what I discovered recently is that I am an introvert playing the role of an extrovert.
Hmm.
And so I can do all those very extroverted things, but I recharge
Hmm.
within myself.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to get uh my friends and the people around me to understand that. My family does, but to understand that no, I don't want to do that. And I live in San Diego, and so there's the it's beautiful out most of the time, and people are like, let's get out and do this and do that, and I'm like, I'm staying home. They're like, what are you doing? I'm gonna take a nap. And they're like, what? What do you mean? You sleep when you're dead? I'm like, maybe, but I'm sleeping right now too, because that's just what feels right to me. And I think that this is the thing. This is, and then I want to get into what you're doing with your nonprofit. And this is the thing right here. It's taking the time however you can get it. And not everyone can do it or chooses to do it in the way that you have chosen to. But when I look at people, including myself, who moved across the country to live in San Diego, while my daughter was in college, um, when a common theme amongst people who have found a way to really create space for themselves so that they can learn who they truly are, what they truly want through the noise of expectations, through the noise of what the 12 steps are to success in this country. There's joy in that.
Yes.
That's the common thing. There's a joy in that. And this is going to sound corny, but like in truly shaping what freedom means for you. There's joy in that. There's joy. And I think that the joy comes, it's not like happiness. Happiness is kind of like what happens at the club in a moment, right? When you're partying or you're just like having a good time or whatever happiness is for a person. There is a joy that comes from having connected with yourself, having given yourself the same time, attention, and consideration that we do other people, so that you could figure out who you are, what you want, how you're made up, and how you want to live.
Yes. And I love that you use that word. I choose that word a lot to describe how I feel now versus how I felt before. Maybe happy is moments, and joy is something that's more, joy is deeper, and it lasts longer.
I agree. So at some point during your travels, you turned this personal healing or this personal reconnection or whatever you can say what it is for you. You turn that into a public responsibility. I'd love to talk about that.
Yes, public responsibility feels right because there is some weight to this. And so sometimes I have to take a break from Color My Outdoors too, because it carries weight. But I wanted, I was making a career change, and so it was like, what do I change to? And decided, okay, I know nonprofit. This is what I know, so I want to create a nonprofit. I had been consulting and working for myself, but I wanted something different, and I really had spent that time when I moved to North Carolina. just I lived steps away from the Pisgah National Forest, and um, there is a waterfall that is maybe 10 minutes from my house, and hiking trails that I can get to within 5 minutes. It was that thing I said about wanting the outdoors to be my way of life and not just something that I go recreate to occasionally. So this gave me this reconnection to nature, which I felt like maybe I'd had in my youth, but then after that it was moments again, um, and just being able to learn how to forage, which was really interesting, like being able to walk through a forest trail or go into my own yard and realize all these things that in the suburbs and urban areas we call weeds. I'm like, no, half of this you can eat. um, this is what at one point our ancestors knew what to do with, right? Like there's medicines that you can make with this. And so I started doing some of this stuff. I started making my own skin care and hair care products. Granted, this was also during COVID, so I wanted to learn to pull myself away from the commercialism a little bit. And it was interesting to realize once I learned to do these things, and while everybody else is so nervous about what's not available in the stores anymore, I didn't have those concerns. I'm like, "Ah, I'm making my own hair care products. I'm making my own skincare products." I realized the abundance of food that is right outside my front door. I started learning how to grow things. And these were things that I realized when just culturally, when there was a migration away from the South into urban areas, right? Or away from rural areas into urban areas, whether you'd stayed in the South or not, we got disconnected from nature. And so realizing that there had been a disconnect, and there were things that that I realized that we once knew how to do, uh, and now I was learning how to do again, felt incredibly powerful to me. Um, and then it was also just the feeling that I have when in nature. So not even the utilization of nature, but just the emotional, spiritual connection that I felt to the earth when I'm in the middle of the forest or when I'm next to this roaring waterfall. And these were all things that I felt like we had become so disconnected from in the hustle and bustle. Um, and that nature had become, yes, there is a physical wellness to being outside. And like, yeah, if you go for a walk or a hike or whatever you do, yes, there is some physical wellness, but there's also something else that is much deeper than, the calories burned or the cardio that you do. There's a physical wellness that happens just from being connected to nature. And there are so many studies that point to that. But these are things that I felt like we're all missing out on this, not to mention the emotional well-being and this. I don't know how to describe it other than a feeling of power, because I realize this, I'm created of the same elements that this waterfall is created from, or this huge, giant tree in the middle of a forest. And just to feel that connection, there is something that happens that I can't explain to people. And until you go spend some quiet time in nature yourself, it doesn't matter what I say, it's something that you have to experience. And so I just wanted to give people opportunities to be outside in this really authentic, organic way. But for a lot of people, it means introducing them to the outdoors first. And so that's a part of this work. It's reintroducing people to the idea of being outdoors. It's giving people the skill set to be outdoors in a responsible way that makes them feel safe. It's creating those safe spaces for them, and just really giving people this opportunity that I am re experiencing in my adulthood in a way that I haven't felt since I was probably a kid.
Who is the rally cry to? Who are you looking to bring to the outside to the outdoors, excuse me.
Um, so Color My Outdoors is for all people of color. So, um, and this growing up in Atlanta, my world was really, it was black white, and so yeah, when it came to race, when it came to, it was always black white. And then I moved to New Mexico, and I remember seeing how Mexicans were discriminated against. I remember seeing how the indigenous folks who lived out there were discriminated against. And I'm like, oh, other folks go through this too. And then I went through the Pacific Northwest, and where there was an Asian population. And I was just like, okay, I realized you know, my story was this black white story. But what if we all got to experience this together? Because when it comes to the outdoors, the way that mainstream media has always painted the story is the main character has always been white. None of us had any any space out there. And so I was like, well, let me do this work in a really collective way that I'm bringing all of us together who have fought against the norm, who felt like we didn't belong out here because of the color of our skin, who have ever felt like the only, um, and give us all avenues and but also opportunities to connect with each other. And so uh, that's the work that I'm trying to do with Color My Outdoors, is really build a space um, where we have new characters in this narrative about the outdoors, and these characters can be the main characters in their story. And it's all the black and brown faces that haven't been a part of the story in the past.
And what can we do to support you?
Thank you. The work for Color My Outdoors is interesting because I focus my work primarily on people who are in the South, because I feel like those voices are also the least heard when we talk about the outdoors. But while my work is focused on the South, I I want this work to reach. It has a ripple effect for everybody. Um, and so anybody can read these stories and still feel connected. And so visit our website, which is colormyoutdoors.org. And we have stories on our website. We've also started a directory to help promote um, outdoor outfitters and organizations that are led by people of color. And so, a way to promote the services that they offer. The South is really an amazing place to travel to, not only for some of your urban experiences, but for the outdoor experiences. And I don't think we get that recognition. So, if anybody is coming to the South, I welcome them to look at our directory and find a hiking group or a kayaking group to connect to and say, oh, I want to go kayaking, and find a group of people who look like them to go, go waterfall chasing or whatever it is that you're interested in. And we are a nonprofit. So, of course, the work that we do, it's charitable work. And we rely on grants and donations to help us do this work. So we love anybody who can point us to a grant or donate on their own or connect us to a company that is willing to work with us. This work only continues if I find the right partners and people to support us.
So donate to Color My Outdoors.
Yes.
Or as you think through the people that you know, the experiences and spaces that you're in, think about aligned organizations that maybe can collaborate with Color My Outdoors or send people through.
Yes.
If you're in that area, if you're in the southeast, yeah, if you're in the southeast and you are looking to connect to the experience of relationship with nature in a different way, reach out to Color My Outdoors or go to the website colormyoutdoors.org to get access to a directory that can point you in that right direction.
And we're on all the social channels. Well, I won't say all the social channels, but we are Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at Color My Outdoors.
Excellent. I have a question for you. If
Yes.
someone listening is feeling disconnected from themselves, what is the smallest thing that they could reconnect? What's the smallest thing that they could do to reconnect with nature or otherwise, starting right now or this
Ooh,
week?
I love, love, love that question. Um, I'm a big journaler, but I know not everybody likes to write. If you do, journaling in nature is incredibly powerful. Um, Sitting somewhere in nature and sitting in nature, and if you're not a journaler, just go sit in nature and think. But sitting in nature and whatever is comfortable for you. So that might mean go into a local park and sitting on a bench. It might be, getting out a blanket and sitting on the grass. It might be going into the woods. But find a large green space that you can sit and just take in some of that power of nature and take it in, feel it. One of the things, I know not everybody's ready for this, but there is science behind it, and just go with me. Taking off your shoes and letting your bare feet feel the bare earth. It's a process called grounding or earthing. And there's something really, really powerful in that. And just taking that moment to feel the earth beneath you and think through. So then you begin to think through or journal through, um, what do you want? And if you don't know what you want, start with what you know you don't want. What do you want to let go of?
That's very powerful and something that you can do no matter what your lifestyle is, no matter where you are. There's a patch of grass and earth everywhere, right? Even in New York City,
Yes.
go to Central Park, go to a
Yeah.
park and
Yeah.
just sit. And I think the act of reacquainting ourselves with what has supported us, what is supporting us, and what's
Mhm.
around us is such a powerful act because it helps us to understand that our life, our world, and our identity is not just tied to these things that we do, it's tied to who we are. And the
Yeah.
way to learn who you are is to get quiet enough to be able to hear
That's
who
the
you
key.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
I'm really excited for you. And I've enjoyed this conversation and I really appreciate your taking the time to share this story. And also I appreciate again the courage that it took for you to make this decision, even if it was a decision that you felt was um, uh, a non negotiable, something you had to do, right?
Mhm.
You did it. And so many people grapple with that,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. So if you're listening, um, and if you've listened, I hope you've heard is that there really is incredible power in your connection to yourself and to the life that whether you've voiced it out loud, whether anyone knows but you. There's so much power in listening to and responding to that voice within yourself that's pointing you into the direction of joy, where you can actually blank canvas yourself to joy. And there's ways to do both. So maybe if you can't do it the way that Simone is doing it, uh, for whatever reason, put yourself on that road.
Find the thing you can do. And the key is to give yourself permission to do it differently than you've done it before or anybody else is doing it.
I think somebody needs to do a documentary on the work that you're doing and on the decision you made and how what you're doing. I really do. And yeah, this has been an incredible conversation. And I know that it's going to be of great service and help and support to others who are listening. I think what you've taught us is that freedom really is something that you can train yourself to have. And it
Yeah.
comes in all different ways, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's steps to it, right? Like, each little step gets you closer and closer to where you want to be.
Yeah. Simone, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for
Thank you,
sharing. I really
Lisane. I'm
appreciate it.
so glad to have been able to share this, and it means a lot to me too. I hope more people are able to find themselves.
Yeah. So again, if you're listening, colormyoutdoors.org. Get yourself there and get yourself reconnected to yourself. It's important.
Yes. Thank you.
What I really appreciated about this conversation is how clearly it shows what freedom really is about. It's about following who you are to wherever it is that you choose to take yourself. Freedom is built through safety, through subtraction sometimes, not adding more, but taking away those things that stand in the way of you connecting with yourself, allowing you to listen to what your body already knows and is trying to tell you. Simone's story reminds us that well-being isn't about pushing harder or doing more. It's about choosing environments, your internal environment and your external environment, the ones that allow us to feel fully into ourselves without judgment, without restriction, without constraint. And when we do that work honestly, it doesn't stop with us. It becomes part of our legacy. It becomes leadership. It becomes an invitation and permission to others and for others to do the same. If this conversation resonated, I invite you to reflect on this question. Where in your life are you being asked to slow down, to simplify, or to return to what feels regulating and true for you? That's often where the path to freedom begins. Thank you again for listening to the podcast, and I look forward to our next conversation.